We begin in South Orange, New Jersey, August 23rd, 1989, at around 10:30 p.m., shortly after police officer Bill Young, Jr. had reported for desk duty. At 11:21 p.m., a call for help came in.
Please tell me,
Hi, this is Chris Fisher at 603 Road.
Okay.
Spoken in. Would you go over here, please?
Okay.
603 Hamilton, thanks.
Right.
Before I had a chance to keep her on the phone, she hung up. So that was the only information we had, that she was in the house and she believed that somebody was in the house with her.
I think she hears somebody still in the house.
In less than a minute, Officer Stephen Andrew and Ed Schmidt arrived to check out the report of a possible robbery in progress.
We purposely parked approximately 4 to 5 houses away so we would not let the suspects know we were on the scene.
We just didn't know if they had guns on them.
So we approached cautiously. While Officer Schmidt went around to the back, I approached the front door.
Hurry, quick, they're robbing the house. They're upstairs with my husband.
I heard Sergeant Andrew call me, and I ran towards the front of the house and at the front door.
No,
I looked back, and the second suspect came down the stairs, and then I went after him. Officer Schmidt was just getting to the rear yard, and that's when we grabbed the second suspect.
All right, I'm on my way there.
John Monsees was the third officer to arrive.
Officer Muncie never made it to the actual house where the robbery occurred. He had picked up the foot pursuit right from there.
Hold it right there.
Going towards Holland Road.
I wasn't too sure which unit was trying to transmit, but for whatever reason, we were getting static.
Orange car, shot fired. Reported as shot fired. Eddie, are you okay? Someone yell for help.
I thought I would find someone holding a gun, or maybe in the bushes, waiting for one of us to follow. But I looked around the corner and found Officer Monsees.
When we continue,
I actually realized that John could be dying, and there was nothing I could do.
Right, Lieutenant. Ambulance and medics are en route.
there were no witnesses when the robbery suspect struggling to escape shot the police officer. But Sergeant Stephen Andrew was the first to find the body of his fellow officer, John Monsees, lying on the ground.
Where you hit, John?
I saw a small hole in his police shirt and blood coming out of his back.
Got a man down. Officer Monsees. Give me an ambulance.
John and I were very close when we were riding together. I introduced him to his wife, Margaret. It was like a sinking feeling inside of me. Because 20 minutes before, we were standing in the locker room getting dressed. I actually realized that John could be dying, and there was nothing I could do.
Members of the South Orange Volunteer Rescue Squad were immediately dispatched to the scene. From several miles farther away, an advanced life support unit was also sent.
It was seconds later that the rescue squad called in the service, and John's wife, Margaret, who was driving that night, was the one that called 17's in service.
7-7, I want a confirmation. He was shot in the shoulder. Okay, I got an officer down here with a chest wound.
We still were not sure at that time who it was, but you could tell that there was some kind of tension in their voice, that it was a little bit more than a usual call.
I knew I couldn't stop the ambulance, so we had to get it to John, because we had to get him to the hospital.
7 to headquarters. Go ahead. Want an ambulance? I want the medics here right away. I got an officer down with a chest wound. Right, Lieutenant. Ambulance and medics are en route.
I pictured the worst. I pictured that John was down with a gunshot wound in the chest. He was unconscious, and that he was losing a lot of blood.
Within minutes, the volunteer rescue squad arrived to treat the officer who had been critically injured.
I thought Margaret knew that John had been shot. And I met her and said, take it easy, don't worry. And she apparently didn't know it was John at that point.
EMT Mike Minch was in charge of the scene.
I could tell from the wound that it had to come pretty close or damage some vital organs. And that's what I was concerned about.
All right, it's on the way, okay?
The third volunteer EMT on the ambulance was Barbara O'Neill.
We got to the backyard, and really all we saw was a male lying on the ground, face down. And at that point, Margaret and I mouthed to each other, "Who is it?" Because it was dark, and we just couldn't really see anything.
Somebody said, "Take it easy, John." And that's when we first realized that it was John. It looked like he was dead. I never expected anything like that to happen. I can't describe the feeling that goes through you when you see your husband laying on the ground like that.
Okay. Hang in there, brother. Hang in there. Got him.
It was difficult because I wanted to be there for both of them, and basically we had to push Margaret aside for a minute and just take care of John.
There's no way of controlling or judging how much he was bleeding internally. And I was really concerned that we were going to lose John at that point.
Their vehicle carried only the most basic equipment. The advanced life support unit with vitally needed IVs had not yet arrived. They decided they could not wait, that John's only hope for survival was to get to the hospital as soon as possible.
The color was terrible, and there was just blood everywhere. And I was really afraid he was going to die. The only thing we could do was just try to keep him awake and conscious until we got down to the hospital. It seemed like forever.
A gunshot wound.
Within 5 minutes, they arrived at University Hospital, where a team of doctors and nurses were waiting to treat John.
27 years old. Gunshot wound.
Okay, gunshot wound, left chest, one wound.
I wanted to just go hold his hand, just to let him know that I was there. But they wouldn't let me go in. I had to stay out of the way so I could take care of him.
See what his body is. Let's line over here.
Come on.
Cardiothoracic surgeon Shlomo Gabay was called in to examine John.
The bullet went through the lung and probably was no farther than 1/8 of an inch from the heart.
It took 3 hours of surgery to stop the bleeding and repair John's punctured lung.
You can say he was lucky. A 10-degree difference. The bullet will have probably gone through the heart and then will probably have killed him.
Who's going up? Who's going?
It's been 2 years since the shooting. John Monsees has completely recovered from his injuries.
Looking back on it, probably the biggest thing I remember is just laying in this yard hoping that somebody was going to find me.
When they told me when they came out of the operating room that it only missed his heart by a centimeter, the only thing I could think of was that he's got to be the luckiest guy in the world.
5 months after the shooting, John returned to active duty with the South Orange Police Department.
I give John a lot of credit for being able to come back to work. In the beginning, he thought that something was wrong with him because he was shot with his own gun. And I told John that he had nothing to be embarrassed about, that he did his best, and he almost laid his life down on the line.
The suspect who shot Officer Monsees was arrested the next day. Both men were convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to lengthy prison terms.
A lot of people figured I was going to leave, but my heart was actually in staying. I had to go back, you know. It's something that I just can't resist. It's an adventure.
Been so much of a workout.
Next,
Something just told me to get up and go outside and check on the kids. And there laid Nicholas face down. He was just limp as a rag and just stretched out.
on March 10th, 1990, in Kernersville, North Carolina, Terry Holt was spending the day at home with his children.
We were out here in the yard just messing around Saturday afternoon, killing time. Got a great idea, you know, why don't the kids and I camp out?
Looks good.
Dad goes, let's set up the tent. Me and my cousin and brother and sister hollered out, yeah, let's do it.
I'm getting right here.
The one thing I was concerned with, if I slept out there, where was I going to sleep? That ground wasn't too comfortable. So I had a blow-up mattress. I got this brilliant idea. I says, hey, Freon jug, pump it up here in about 5 minutes and we'll be done with it. I'm a heating and air conditioning technician. Freon's a big part of my business. Everybody's pumped up car tires, balloons, just little odd stuff. I know that Freon is heavier than air. It will sink to the lowest place, and once you breathe it in your lungs, it will just smother you more or less.
But Terry wasn't worried because the mattress was sealed.
We have a real fun time camping out, even if it is out in the backyard.
Hey, Daddy, tell us a spooky story.
We proceeded to sleep in the tent that night. Had a good time, all of us joking, kidding, carrying on.
The next morning, 7-year-old Nicholas was playing inside the tent.
A friend and my sister and I were in and out the tent. My brother was helping out, and he had the cork undone.
Put them right there up for Dad. Those ridders just posted up. Put them down now. I'll kill them all. I don't care. Look, I'll kill them myself. Oh my God.
We heard him yell, oh my gosh, and we thought he was just fooling around. He used to play jokes on us like he was dying and everything, and we thought he was playing with us right then.
Something just told me to get up and go outside and check on the kids. So that's when I walked around the corner and just happened to walk by and look in the tent. And there laid Nicholas face down. He was just limp as a rag and just stretched out.
Nicholas.
I know first thought, he's full of Freon. He was just completely gone.
Oh my God, what happened?
Nicky was just limp, and I looked at his face and I saw a clammy, gray, dead look about him.
I checked Nicholas's pulse. It was weak, but I knew he did have a heartbeat. The main thing I was worried about when I checked for the air, he had none. He was like a deflated balloon. There just wasn't nothing left there.
Because Freon is heavier than air, it had filled the boy's lungs, and no oxygen could get in.
Emergency services.
At 2:52 p.m., Teresa's call for help came into the Forsyth County Fire Control Center. A rescue unit with the Piney Grove Volunteer Fire Department was immediately dispatched, but they were a few miles away.
When we came down the hall, we saw Nicholas, and I was scared that I was going to lose my brother.
Teresa then called her father.
It took me a while to make out it was my own daughter calling, and I heard her say that there's something happened to Nicholas. And then her next statement that I understood her to say was that he wasn't breathing.
I run outside, and at that time the neighbors were coming across the yard with the girls.
I couldn't see any sign of life in him whatsoever when I first saw him.
And that's when it really scared me.
I yelled at Beanie, our next-door neighbor. I told her to keep the girls outside. I didn't want them to see their brother in the shape that he was in.
I knew that I had to get that air back in his lungs or it would be death. About the third time I'd give him mouth-to-mouth, I got a little peep out of him or squeak.
EMT Mike Chifa was less than a block away when his pager went off. All he knew was that a child was not breathing at the house of his friends, the Holts.
I waved for him to come in and told him that it was Nicholas and he wasn't breathing.
Terry, what happened?
His face was all white, lips were blue, his eyes were rolled back into his head. I said, we need to put Nicholas on the rug because if we have to do CPR, it's going to be better on a hard surface.
So I went inside and so did they, and the next thing we know, Dad's bringing him in and his leg was in his arm. We were outside saying prayers and hoping that he would live. It's a scary feeling having a brother of your own that's near death.
Within minutes, Teresa's father, Ray Black, arrived.
My granddaughters were out on the front porch, and they were tremendously upset. They were crying and screaming. They wanted to see their brother. My impression of Nicholas was that the child had passed on, really. I did pray to God to take my life instead of his, because, he's just a baby. And I've lived a pretty good long time.
Nicholas started throwing up, and this black, oozy stuff was coming out of his nose and mouth.
Come on, get it out. Come on.
I felt better when I seen that. I knew something was moving again.
Okay, he's breathing. He's breathing.
And I cleaned everything out, and then at that time, he started coughing, so he started breathing on his own.
Come on. Okay, come on. Okay.
It had been 7 minutes since Nicholas breathed in the Freon. His mother and the paramedics did not know if there would be brain damage.
His eyes were opening, and I went down and knelt down beside him, and Harold behind me, and my dad, and was asking him, could he hear us? I had my hand around his 2 little fingers, and I said, if you can hear us, I said, squeeze Mama's hand. And he never would squeeze my hand, but he was looking around.
Eventually, he knew where he was at. He started talking, and we loaded him up in the ambulance, and we transported him to the hospital.
Nicholas had suffered no permanent injuries. He was released from the hospital later that same day. The quick action of his father and the other rescuers had prevented a serious tragedy.
My husband, to me, is a hero, and Mike, and all the people that worked in the squad from Piney Grove and the hospital.
Freon is dangerous. It'll kill you. It is a fact that everybody in my business use it to do things that shouldn't be done. But now it's kept up in a jug in the truck where it belongs.
The happiest one for me was when I got to come home and I got to see my mom and dad and my 2 sisters, and I was glad to have a second life instead of dying right then. The time I thought that things would get better is when he came back, and we seen him sitting here, alive, and knowing that he was alive, and that we could be sisters and brothers again. Love each other.
The backyard of Ruth and David Spaulding's Fort Lauderdale home borders a 180-acre state park. For years, they'd enjoyed watching the wild animals that flocked to the park. But the Spauldings never expected that one would become a house guest.
Look, he's carrying it. He picks him up in his front paws, and
that's why we find a lot of mangoes down there.
Well, don't worry about it. They don't eat much. We're kind of allowed. Come on. Come on, let's go back. Meet the paper and worry about something else.
Ruth and I were sitting in the living room here. She said, I heard something strange out back. Maybe you better see what it is. This was at 10:30 at night, and it was very, very dark. So I turned on a flashlight, and there was a beautiful gold snake that was wrapped about 5 times around a raccoon that he had just killed.
Ruth?
I was very startled. I mean, this was something different from the other animals.
This I saw with my own eyes. Now, where the heck? What? It was right.
She came out there with me just in time to see the tail of the snake disappear under the house. Ruth called 911, and the police said they don't handle snakes.
The Spauldings had no idea how big the problem was, but fearing it could be dangerous, they warned their nearest neighbors.
The neighbors next door, the Spauldings, had called us and warned us that they had spotted a snake in their backyard the night before.
They said they saw a huge snake eating a 30-pound raccoon. We automatically feared for our children. We have a child that's smaller than what that snake was eating.
Until they could find someone to help them with their unwanted house guest, the Spauldings built an elaborate trap designed to keep the snake contained under the house.
We felt that he couldn't bother anyone else, but we did find one morning that he had broken out through it at a different point and was probably into the park after raccoons. I really felt that it was at least 20 feet, and although other people didn't believe me.
We kind of brushed it off a little bit, you know, sure, there's a large snake, show us. As time went on, they did show us. When we saw the snakeskin, that made us believers.
We got the name Todd Hardwick from the Science Museum, and we did wonder about the name.
Pesky critters. We're nuisance wildlife trappers when animals, primarily in an urban situation, get into a conflict with the homeowners. I am hired to go out and solve the conflict, and it's our policy here to always solve the conflict by taking the animal alive and relocating it to a better environment. We handle everything from buffalo all the way down to possums, bobcats, and everything else. We don't do dogs and cats, but that's about the only thing we wouldn't do.
Todd went to the Spauldings' house to see if this was just another big snake story with Tom McClellan, an expert in snakes.
We went out the backyard and we saw a trap. It was set up to catch the snake. It was humorous. It was made out of 3/8-inch plywood, and for a snake of this size, just crawling in there and expanding its coils would have blown the sides right out of the cage.
The Spauldings explained that the snake had even used the trap to shed his skin on, as if to mock their trap. To make fun of it, he shed his skin on top of it.
The size of the scales in the middle of the back gave me an idea. It was definitely in excess of 18 feet. And by the pattern that was on it, I knew it was a reticulated python. And I told this to Todd, and he said, well, you know, what are reticulated pythons like? And I said, they're usually nasty.
My heart began to race, and I began to have many, many thoughts racing through my mind as to what was going to unfold that day and in the following days.
The Spauldings had lined toothpicks in front of the hole so that we could tell if the snake had gone in. And indeed, all the toothpicks were laying bent down, pointing under the house.
I'll take a look under here and see what it looks like. It's a fairly active tunnel under here.
Yeah, what's it look like?
Well, it's really smooth. Looks like she's been coming through here on a very regular basis.
It was a small chamber, and there was another hole going under another floor joist into another area. So rather than waste time digging into this area when we just have to dig into another one, we examined some blueprints of the house that the Spauldings happened to have and decided that around the corner was the best place to dig because it would put us in the largest chamber underneath the house and give us access to all the other individual areas.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead down in and see what I can see.
I was aware of the size of the snake. Not many people were. To have two people go under the house and get in that enclosed area with a huge snake seemed to me to be a very unwise thing to do.
Our plan at that point was to go under the house, assess the situation, determine where the snake might be, but not confront it.
Wow. We had no idea what was going on under there. We were very concerned and felt that we were responsible having let these fellows go under.
Look at this hole over here, Tom. Looks like he comes out and heads in your direction.
I got a fresh hole right next to me.
I tell you what,
There's a musk that snakes give off, a scent, and it was very strong. You could smell the snake in the hole.
I think we should leave for today now that we know where she is, because we're not going to be able to handle this by ourselves.
To go under the house and try and handle that animal alone would be idiotic, and two would be a little less idiotic, but still not smart.
I look worried. She's in there, all right.
Well, we were greatly relieved to see them come out, I can tell you.
Tom and Todd had gotten an idea how big this problem was.
They said they were going to get more help and come back the next day.
That ought to hold until tomorrow morning. Make tracks before rush hour.
It had taken weeks for the Spauldings to find anyone who'd help them with their snake problem. The day after their scout trip, Todd and Tom returned with reinforcements. Snake hunters Joe Wasilewski and Felix Velez.
Of course you were afraid. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. But fear is part of it. We like adrenaline, we like excitement, something different.
Coming in.
Let's get some of the equipment.
Since we clearly did not know what would happen, we wanted to be prepared for everything. So we had an excessive amount of equipment.
Yeah, you guys move a little bit. Here I come. You guys see anything yet?
All right, Joe.
That was the worst part of the whole day. Getting in that little hole.
There you go.
Being in little closed places drive me crazy. I just felt this whole house collapsing in on me. That was rough. I'm telling you guys right now. We're all a little scared, let's face it. I'm not lying to you. Sure, it was exciting, it was scary. Anybody would be scared in there. I don't care what you say.
This is it, Todd, huh?
Yeah, that's the hole.
We approached the hole where we thought the snake was, and at that point we decided that we should take rocks and block off all these other holes of escape. And also at that point, Tom and Felix began to enlarge the snake's entry into the second chamber.
Well, what do you think, Tom? Big enough, you're gonna hit it?
I had a lot of really terrible thoughts. I was terrified of the thought that the second Tom's head appeared in that chamber, that if the snake were laying close, it would instinctively strike at him and he would take a strike in the face or in the throat.
I got a visual. What do you got? It's a retic. How big? Big.
A big snake. It was bigger than I thought it was. I knew it was over 18 feet just from looking at the skin, but you had to take a step back and look at this thing. It was an impressive animal.
You got it?
I immediately realized that the size of this snake and how far we were from the original hole, it was going to be impossible to wrestle that snake into a sleeping bag and drag him back out of that chamber the way we came in.
Well, I'm getting out of here.
So at that point, I suggested that myself and Joe, who was obviously the most claustrophobic at that time, we exit and look into the possibility of coming in from the other side of where the snake was.
You're gonna go over here and get it from the front.
Tom was explaining that he thought he saw light coming in.
Oh, that's right, you're with that. There's the other hole there, huh?
Yeah. If it comes at you, let me know. I'll pull you out by the legs, Tom.
You'll be the first one I call. All right, pass me some of that stuff.
Here.
We left Tom and Felix there to keep their eye on the snake, and I was uneasy about that because I was worried that if the snake got hostile towards them, that it was just those two, which we never wanted just two people down there. So when we got out front, I was very anxious to dig that opening as fast as we could. And I was extremely nervous not knowing what was going on down there with those two guys.
It's great. All right, hang me down a little bit more. All right, I need like one more foot. Can you guys hang me down a little more? Okay, I see her. Can you guys get her to come around to the right a little bit?
And as I was lunging in to get it by the head, it occurred to me that my boots might slip off when these guys went to pull me out, and I would then be virtually tumbling in on the snake's lap. And the snake suddenly turned in a position to come up towards my face. And at that point, I had an opportunity to get the snare around his neck and cinched it up tight.
You got him, pull! All right, we got this. He's got it! Go, 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 go! Okay, wait, what's the news?
The crowd was screaming, people were tripping on themselves, retreating from where we were. They had been jockeying for position all morning and suddenly realized they didn't want to be up close.
It had undoubtedly either been turned loose or it escaped. It's not the snake's fault for being under that house. The blame for that snake being loose rests solely on the person that either allowed it to escape or turned it loose. That's the person to blame for it, not the snake.
It kind of boggles our imagination to feel that for 15 to 18 years, we were not aware that the snake was here at all.
When it was all over, this snake story had a happy ending for everyone, but especially for Todd and his new roommate, Big Mama, the 21-foot, 250-pound python.
If I had one word to sum up the whole thing, I would say great, because I wouldn't have missed this for the world. I couldn't think of any place I would have rather been at that moment than under the house with that snake.
On an average day, the Mid-Georgia Ambulance Service receives dozens of calls for help and usually responds to the scene within 8 minutes. But October 1st, 1989 was not just an average day.
Around 3 in the afternoon, a call for help came into dispatcher Pam Bowman.
BSO calls. Thomas Road and Bonnie Gilbert Road together too.
Bonnie Gilbert Road. It was at least a 2-car accident when it was called in. At this time, we didn't know that it would be more than that. 2-car accident, at least a 2-car accident, Bonnie Gilbert Road, with injuries.
Neil, you want to go on this one?
Yeah. Most of the time, if we have another truck available, the truck will back up that one, just in case there's more patients to be transported. It was pouring down rain, which it had been all day, and the roads were real slippery. We had had a lot of accidents that day.
2 ambulances headed to the scene with number 23 bringing up the rear. Cardiac technician Tom Kane was on the radio, and EMT Neil Stevens was driving. The 2 ambulances kept in close contact because of the weather. The lead ambulance was driven by paramedic Steve Parker.
It was dangerous conditions, and at one point we did have a problem. We went through a dip in the road and hit a large waterfall. It slide a little bit, and we notified the other truck to be careful. Y'all watch out for that water back there.
As they rounded a curve, the lead ambulance lost sight of number 23.
1 minute they're there, next minute they're not. I didn't really know what to think.
Tom and I were scheduled to get married, and the first thing I thought of was that they had seen an accident that maybe Steve had not seen, and they had stopped to render aid, and maybe they were out of the truck, which was why I tried on the big radio, because they would have a portable with them.
Came in to 11M23.
When they didn't answer on that, I don't know what went through except that something was wrong.
The fire hydrant had ripped a hole in the ambulance's gas tank.
Came in to 11M23. Came in to 210.
Just not knowing and being real scared and not wanting to think about the worst, but if you've ever worked this profession, then you've seen the worst, and you know what vehicles can do. You know what the rain does. You know what the roads do.
You have a situation called patient abandonment, that when you receive a call and you do not respond for some reason, you can be held liable. So we continued on the call.
You might want to send a unit over to the city of Mercer University.
I was nervous and upset
Steve came up on the radio and told me that maybe I needed to send the fire department over there to see what had happened to them, that maybe they had stopped for an accident or something was wrong.
A Georgia Power Company troubleshooter on his way to work had seen the accident happen.
And as I ran over there was an opening in the windshield, just enough to get my fingers in there. He was a healthy guy, but just seemed like something just took over, just took control.
The man finally managed to pull Tom out of the wreck, though Tom was twice his weight.
I said to myself, there's no way I'm going back in there. And by that time, I was back in there.
The man then got Neil's jam seatbelt undone somehow and pulled him to safety as well.
See, if he had just even hesitated for a second, we'd have been dead. We've been to people that have doused themselves in gas and burned and lived for a few hours afterwards. And that's one of the most painful ways to die I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of people die.
I thought, how did I survive that? That's just remarkable. He's just an average built person. Obviously not real strong, not strong enough to miraculously pull a 350-pound Tom out of the ambulance. The only thing that I could explain how it happened would be the adrenaline that happens in a situation that way. Our bodies sometimes can be pushed further than we think.
I never had that feeling before. It's just like a force, like energy. And I know if it wasn't for that feeling, that instinct, it wouldn't have happened.
If we hadn't gotten out in the next 10, 15 seconds, we'd be dead right now. We'd be 6 foot under. We owe our life to that man.
Tom called in, and it was a real short conversation.
I'm on a cellular phone at Macon Memorial Park. The ambulance is split, it's burned, we're out, we're okay.
Macon Memorial?
Macon Memorial Park, it's a
cemetery.
Cemetery.
Okay.
I wanted to know, I wanted to see for myself, and I knew I couldn't. And the fact that we couldn't do anything about it, that we had to still keep working as if nothing was wrong. If another call had came in, I'd still have to take it. Steve and Tim still had to go on their call. And it wasn't that we didn't care or that we weren't real upset. It's just, that's just what we do.
Concerned that he would be late to work, the man simply got into his pickup and drove off without telling anyone his name.
A few minutes later, I was asking people where he was, and somebody said, oh, he left. He's gone. And I turned around and said, but you don't understand. I got to go thank this man. He just saved my life.
A good Samaritan rescued 2 people from a burning ambulance.
By the next day, everyone in Macon was trying to find out who the mysterious hero was.
Returned, caught fire, trapping 2 medical technicians inside.
Dopey Thomas heard the news and knew they were looking for his co-worker, Norris Thomas.
Safety from the burning vehicle. The man then vanished from the accident scene before anybody could get his name. Authorities are hoping this good Samaritan will come forward and identify himself.
Norris is sort of a reserved type person, you know. Certainly I wouldn't, go in his privacy without talking to him.
But Dopey wanted Norris to get the credit he deserved.
It was just something that I did, and I just leave. I don't wait for him to come out and thank me for doing something like that. I just went ahead on and left.
Good morning.
Once he had permission, Dopey gave Norris's name to the people at Mid-Georgia Ambulance.
I heard on the radio coming to work you're trying to find the guy that pulled your people out of your ambulance. I kind of got excited because I noticed, word's kind of getting out what a good thing my buddy's done,
When I went up and shook his hand and told him on behalf of my family, my parents and my wife, that I thank him for pulling me out. He told me, he said, let's just play this down. And I said, but Norris, what you did was out of the ordinary. I said, you saved my life.
He said, Norris, you did a great thing. My job is to go out and save people's lives every chance I get. And he said, that's what you did. That's what you did for me. And, I
I was stunned for a little while after he said that, and I never did realize that. I never did think about it that way.
2.5 months later, Pam and Tom were married.
To be pulled out by a bystander instead of us pulling the bystander out, it's kind of a swap on the tables. And it's nice to know that somebody out there is willing to risk their lives for us.